All right, it is 10:01 a.m. We call the meeting to order and ask everybody to mute your microphones when you are not speaking and turn them on when you are speaking. Please stay on camera during the entire time for quorum purposes. And each time you speak, please announce your name first. And we'll be reminding you of that because we will always be forgetting. But we want to make sure your names are recorded because this entire event is being recorded. So let's start with a roll call. Delia, if you'll do that, please.
Yes, sir. John Ricard, presiding officer.
Here.
Michael McDonald.
Here.
Ron Menard.
Here.
Michael Olson.
Here.
Rob Roy Parnell.
Here.
Kathy Ann Riley.
Here.
And Jody Nike.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. And we do have a new member to welcome, and we're delighted to have Jody Nike with us. Jody, would you take just a minute and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
I am Jyoti Naik. I'm an architect, certified accessibility specialist in Texas, as well as International Code Council. I was on the Washington State Board for code review for accessibility as well for several years. So I'm real happy to be here.
Thank you. We're delighted to have you. So let's turn our attention to the minutes. They should be in your packet. Give you just a second to pull those up and look at those. Delia, did you want to put those on for everybody to see, or are we okay with just looking at your packet? You're on mute too. You're muted.
My apologies. I'm okay. We can, everybody, I did send the minutes to the committee, so
okay.
Just need a motion.
Assuming everybody has had a chance to look at those, do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
So move.
We have a motion by Mike McDonald. Do we have a second?
Second.
And second
Kathy
for Kathy. Thank you. Any motions on the floor for the debate? Is there any changes anybody needs to make? Hearing none, Delia, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. John Ricard, presiding officer.
Yay.
Michael McDonald.
Here.
Ronald Menard.
Yay.
Michael Olson.
Yay.
Rob Roy Parnell.
Yay.
Kathy Ann Riley.
Yay.
And Jody Nike.
Yay.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So item D on the agenda is open government training, and I'm going to turn it over to Jessica for that.
Thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen with y'all and do some brief training since the last time we met and did training was at the end of 2019, and now we have a new member.
And please identify yourself with your full name.
Yes.
That's my fault. Sorry.
No problem. So let me get this going for y'all. All right. Can everybody see my screen?
I think so.
Okay. So my name is Jessica Escobar. I'm an assistant general counsel with TDLR, and I'm going to be doing your open government training this morning. So we are going to be covering 3 different topics: the Open Meetings Act, the Administrative Procedures Act, and also the Public Information Act. And we'll do some brief overview on each of those this morning. So we'll start with the Open Meetings Act because that's why we're here. The Open Meetings Act is available to ensure that there is open and transparent government as it relates to meetings of governmental bodies. The main purpose is to ensure that meetings are open to the public. They have public notice of what the meetings will be, and that notice includes the time, place, and subject of what the meetings will be. So there is always a liberal view of the Open Meeting Act to ensure that there is that they are viewed in terms of open government, which is 50% plus one, so you've got to have 5 for a quorum. So a quorum of the governmental body that is meeting must be met to have taken official action. If you don't have a quorum, you can certainly meet. You cannot take any official action. And then you've got to have deliberation. So that's when you guys are meeting together and you're discussing any type of issue that is within your jurisdiction, something that's affecting you as a board. So when you're meeting, it's you all are meeting together as a governmental body, so as the Elimination of Architectural Barriers Board, and you're talking about business related to the board. That is when you are meeting to take an action. So what's very important is that we have notice. We need to know when, where, and what is going to be talked about during this meeting. So we provide notices as the department in the form of an agenda. Those agendas are filed with the Texas Secretary of State at least 7 days prior to the meeting to give notice to the public, adequate notice so that they can be engaged and participate to the extent that they want to. We post that both online at our website as well as with the Secretary of State. And we also go over and above and we send listserv notices to all of our to those licensees that are part of the program. So anything that is not on this noticed agenda cannot be discussed in this particular meeting because we did not advise the public that it would be the topic of conversation. So if it's not on there, we can set it for the next meeting. So anytime that you all are meeting to discuss anything or together, it becomes a meeting. So you need to be sure that you're taking care to not violate the Open Meetings Act. Does that mean that anytime you all are together, you potentially can violate the Open Meetings Act? No, not necessarily. You all are able to meet and talk together. For example, if you're at a conference or you're just, incidentally working on a project together, you can certainly meet. You just have to be cautious that you are not together talking about board business. So you need to be careful in doing this that you are not talking about issues, for example, rulemaking or the standards or something, and making decisions on those things as a group. You want to be aware of the walking quorum. Now, what is walking quorum? Walking quorum is something when you have less than a quorum, so less than your 5. You may even start with a couple of members talking about official business. So you may just have a couple of y'all that are emailing about the rules or some rule changes or a particular issue that you're thinking about that is on the radar for the TDLR or an upcoming change to task. And it starts that way, but then there's a trickle down of communication. So for example, there may be a couple of y'all that start on an email chain, but then that email chain gets forward, or a couple of the members start something and then one of those other members calls a different member. So now that's where a walking quorum begins. So a walking quorum can occur, like I said, during a conference call, a video conference. You can just be talking in the hallway. More importantly, it's during emails, text discussions, and now during Twitter and Facebook and these other things that you can have an open meetings violation. So when you're engaging on Facebook, you want to be cautious in not posting something that can turn into a question and lead to a big thread of conversation if it's something that particularly relates to the board. So how do you avoid that? If you're meeting in small groups, you want to be thoughtful in what you're discussing. You obviously won't have the open meetings police walking around and watching you, but just be thoughtful in your discussions. In your emails, we always advise to send things via BCC, blind copied, or the best practice would be to send them through Delia. If there's something that needs to go out to the board, send it to Delia, have her send it to the board members because she could send it via blind copy. Any responses can then be forwarded out to the board, sent it out to your chair, and then you avoid the potential for any inadvertent group responses. Same thing on social media. You want to be cautious in how you post those things. You want to avoid any type of polling inadvertently where you're asking questions. So going back to our agenda, we can only talk about things that are on the agenda. So if something comes up during the comment period or there's something that comes up that we're discussing on any point in the agenda that is not listed, something just is brought up for discussion. What we have to do, and you'll find often that, I may mention it or Mary Winston may mention it, we'll say, this isn't on the agenda, but we are happy to put it on the next meeting's agenda. And so we'll have to table it. We can't go into deep discussions on it, and it'll be for the next time. We do give the public time to comment. We didn't have any commenters for this meeting, but they are definitely able to speak during the public comment period. Oftentimes you'll see this is where it applies. We can't engage in what they're offering if it's, you know, certainly not on our agenda. We can often respond and say, we'll look into your issue. We can certainly discuss it at the next meeting. So to avoid violating this Open Meetings Act, we post with plenty of time. We have our agenda filed with the Secretary of State, and we avoid talking about issues that are not on that agenda. So what happens if you do violate the Open Meetings Act? So a person that is interested in the topic of that conversation, the media, somebody affected by the program, can file an action with the courts to stop whatever happens. Less likely to take place with a board, but maybe they didn't like a rule that was presented for adoption, and they may go to court and have that action voided. A more serious penalty is for you all personally. They may seek for a walking quorum, they may file against board members, and you may have criminal penalties taken against you. So we obviously want to avoid that. Avoid the walking quorum, avoid taking actions outside of a public meeting, which obviously we won't do. We facilitate meetings for you. We can set meetings when you need to meet very easily. So just avoid those potential Open Meetings Act violations. Resources for you, and those are available to you. So what's next? Administrative Procedure Act, and this is something that's very important as it relates to rulemaking, which is a big part of what we do. So the Texas Administrative Procedure Act is another one of those things that promotes transparency and public participation during rulemaking in this case. So rules are, of course, where we establish these minimum standards for practice and procedures for state agencies. So rules are where we implement law, we set policy or procedure, and we set requirements for state agencies. They are not simply an internal policy or organization of the state agency. We do use them for amendment or repeal of a prior rule, or just maybe a new rule where we establish something. So where do we get the ideas for our rulemaking? A legislative change may tell us that we have to adopt rules. Your work groups may say these are ideas that we have for rulemaking. The advisory board, during the meeting, you may say this is something that we need to address, and we will bring it back to program and with staff, and we'll discuss it. Staff may have ideas, and then we also do a 4-year rule review every 4 years, and we'll review our rules, send them out for public comment, and say, are these still working? And we may get ideas there. One of the other unique things is the rule petition, and that's also an option for rules. So what is a rule petition? It's rare, but it happens, and an interested person may say, here is a rule I would like adopted. They submit a petition to us along with the language that they are wanting adopted. And this can be any person who is a Texas resident, Texas business, governmental subdivision in Texas, or a public-private organization that is not a state agency, but still located in Texas. So the key here, Texas related entity. So skip all through these. Okay, so the Administrative Procedures Act, how does it work? There's a lot of steps in here. So we start out with our rules, our ideas for rules, and then we go through the drafting process. From there, we send these out to you all for consideration. Once we get a proposed rule, we bring them to you all and say, hey, what do you think? And then once we get approval, we send them to the Texas Register where they're published for public comment. So at that point, the public has 30 days to provide their comments to us. We review them, and we review to see if there's any substantive changes that we may need to make based on those comments. We bring that proposal with any edits back to you all a second time for review. And based on those comments, you may say, yes, we agree, no, we don't, take this back, and we will go from there. Once approved, we bring the rules to the commission, and the commission will then make the final review and adopt the rules. From there, we send them back to the Texas Register for adoption, and they are effective 20 days after they're filed. So it's a bit of a lengthy process, but allows us to ensure that we have input from many different individuals, from staff, from the board, from the work groups, and from the public. So we also have the 4-year rule review process. So this is a requirement and in law is that we review our rules. And so we have a 4-year schedule. We put out our notice that we're going to be reviewing our rules, and the public, again, has that 30-day comment period. We take those comments in, we bring them back to the commission, and then we bring them back to you all. So again, lots of opportunities for public participation. Some more resources for you all. And finally, in the Public Information Act, another piece that has gives the public ready opportunities to see what government agencies are doing. It gives them the opportunity to have access to all the documents, the records, and information that a state agency has. There are minimal exceptions, but for the most part, all documents are open to the public. So this includes any electronic communications, things on any device that is part of the state. So our phones, cell phones, desk phones, laptops. If it's conducting state business and it's part of the state, then it's subject to public information. So again, construed liberally to make sure that the public has that transparency and there's a want for granting that request for information. So how does this process work? And this is not just with our agency, but any public and governmental entity across the state. A request is received, and we've got 10 business days to respond. So within our agency, once we get a request, we process it as soon as we possibly can. We review it, we determine where it needs to go, we route it, and our staff is fantastic in working with staff to get a response right away. So if for some reason we got something and it was a request for information that may be held with the board, we'll reach out to you. And so we ask that you work with us very quickly to make sure we can comply with the Open Records, the Public Information Act. So I did mention there are some exceptions to disclosure. There are some things that never will be released. Date of birth, your email address, certain education documents, certain health information, HIPAA, medical privacy. So there's some things that without exception will never go out. And there's some things that we do have exception to, and our staff is fantastic in working about getting those exceptions sent out to the Office of the Attorney General. So that is in a nutshell what Public Information Act is and open government. And I am available for questions. We can always address them offline if you need to, but you've also got the resources available to you. And I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Jessica. Okay, item E on the agenda is public comment. Should note that requests for to make a public comment have to be submitted by email prior to noon yesterday, and we did not receive any public comments for this meeting, correct, Delia? That's right. So we can move on to the next agenda item. Item number F is update regarding the proposed revisions to the Texas Accessibility Standards. I'm going to turn it over to Marcia Godo.
Thank you. Marcia Godo, Regulatory Program Management Division. As you know, the RPM team is in conjunction with General Counsel having been working on the proposal for a 2022 update to the Texas Accessibility Standards. It has been 10 years since our last issue of TAS, and we felt the program would benefit from the update. The proposal is intended to locate all technical requirements in one location. For example, the requirements located in Rule 68103 and 68104 about correctional facilities and additional parking requirements will be added to the actual TAS document. In addition, the technical memorandums that are more on the technical requirement side than they were about clarifications to the department's stance have been integrated into the 2022 TAS proposal. While we were drafting, we provided some clarifications on common technical issues or inquiries that we receive in our Tech Info email, and moved some of the advisory comments that are actually requirements more than they are advisory, just as clarification points. We also added some technical requirements that are based on technological advances, such as adult changing tables and electrical vehicle charging stations. Finally, we added a whole new section based on the federally proposed outdoor guidelines. This includes things like parks and trails. And this project's been a labor of love, and we're excited to share it with the public because we believe by locating all the requirements in one location, the 2022 task will provide more accessibility to the state of Texas. So the next step in the process is for us to gather public comment. We want the public to take a look at the proposal and give us feedback. We know we've not thought of everything, and we want the 2022 task to be the best document and accessibility requirements it can be. So we will be posting it on our website in conjunction with the Texas Register for 30 days. There we'll have a web form available where the public can submit the comments beginning on April 8th. And then once all the comments have been received, TDLR with the advisory work groups and some other stakeholder groups will meet to research these items. We'll discuss and research the ideas that making sure that they don't violate ADA requirements and that they're really beneficial to the public. Once all the research is complete, TDLR will make a final draft, and the AB Advisory Board will then meet again so that they can share the final proposal prior to submitting to the Commission for approval and adoption. Does anybody have any questions about the proposal or the process?
Marsha, it's Rob Roy Parnell.
Yes.
In your presentation at the APA convention, you mentioned that the ANSI 2017 would also be incorporated. Is that also part of this incorporation as well?
Yes, our goal is to research and hopefully update some reference standards because, as you know, they're kind of old, and so we want to make sure that they're updated if we can. Like I said, the main focus is going to be that our updates don't violate ADA requirements.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Questions? Okay, thank you, Marcia. All right, item G on the agenda is discussion and appointment of work group assignments. And I had emailed each of you to ask if you had preferences, and I made some guesses to start with. But I'm going to turn this over to Jessica, and we can talk about those.
Thank you. So Jessica Escobar, Assistant General Counsel. So the work groups will be, they've been a little bit reworked from what you've previously seen. So it's been a couple years. We've had some movement on the board. And so these work groups are new. So we've got 3 different work groups: rules, compliance, and standards. And those are to review all rules. And for example, now the task. And so anything that is affecting those compliance and rules and standards that both RASs and anyone has to follow will be kind of funneled through this work group. We've got a second work group to address procedures specifically applicable to the RASs, the Registered Accessibility Specialist procedures. And there's a third work group that is enforcement, to review and make recommendations regarding our criminal conviction guidelines, penalty matrix, and other enforcement-related matters. So if you've got rules, you have a corresponding enforcement work group that addresses the penalties associated with that. So we have the 3 work groups, and in this case, again, going back to our quorum, the work groups can have no more than 4 members, and so those are set up. If you have any questions, let me know, but it sounds like your chair has got all of those scored away, so I'm going to defer back to him.
Thanks, Jessica. So, yeah, if we can see those, I want to point out that we have 2 vacancies on the board, on the committee, so I have left 2 slots for them. A few people, can we scroll down just a little bit? We can see, there you go. A few people are on twice. Mr. McDonald, I have you on twice, but it's not an obligation on your part if you wanted to drop off one or the other of those. I would like to have 3 at least on each, but there's not an obligation to be on 2. Some of you have asked to be on 2, and that's great. And this is a good time to speak up if you don't like your assignment, if you'd like to be on a different one, or we can do a little. We don't want to do a lot of spend a lot of time working around, but most of you have responded, so I think we're pretty clear on the board and the members for most of the work groups. But I just want to open this up for anybody has any particular concerns with the work groups that you are assigned to.
And Chairman, I will remind everybody that these are advisory board members, and you all have the resource to invite subject matter experts in the field. And so those persons can also be a part of these work groups at your discretion. So these are just in particular AB members, and you can always invite people to each individual meeting, and they don't need to be appointed to these work groups at this time.
That's a great point. Thank you.
Yes, just to back that up, I'm sorry. So because they would just be consultants, right? So that would be perfect for them to come in and consult with questions. And I'm sorry, Mary Winston, but I interrupted someone who was speaking. I do apologize.
Hi, this is Jyoti Naik. Is it possible for me to be on the Standards and Rules Committee or group?
Sure. I don't see a problem with that at all.
Thank you.
Ms. McDonald, are you interested in both of the ones I have you on, or would you prefer to just be on one?
It looks like they are. I'm not completely sure of how these assignments fit into the the Open Meetings Act, how these meetings can take place and not be somewhat in non-compliance with the Open Meetings Act. And I'm sure there's an answer for it, and I'm just shaking my head a little bit.
Okay, I'm happy to answer that question. And the reason why is that no formal actions are taken. So these are discussions, and you're reviewing and making recommendations and looking at matters, but there are no discussions and actions taken during these meetings. So that's why
they don't constitute a walking quorum?
They don't. And so the other issue with these is work groups are not subject to the Open Meetings Act.
Oh, all right. No, I have no objections to the committees that you put me on, John. Thank you.
Okay.
And Mr. McDonald, we also take pains to have under the number of the appointed positions. So 4, that's why we have a maximum of 4. We just want to have belts and suspenders, so we don't put a quorum of the positions within the work groups.
Hi, this is Jyoti Naik. Can I be removed from the procedures group?
That'd be great. Do that
Thank
right
you.
now. Okay. And as I say, we have 2.
John, you put me on twice. I can only be.
No, yeah. I'm not doing that. That's not me typing.
Rob Roy Parnell asked me
You just
to be
removed. Moved up to number 2 instead of number 4.
Very good, sir. Thank you.
Okay. And so just, John Rickard again, as a reminder, we have 2 vacancies. When we fill those, we might do a little shuffling depending on who those people are and what their interests are. But for now, I think this works. Any other concerns or comments?
Kathy Riley here. With the introduction of maybe an expert that we may request, will that affect the Open Meetings Act by increasing our numbers, maybe like in a group that already has 4 to have 5?
I'll jump in, Ms. Riley. No, it will not. This open meetings and all the wonderful training that Jessica just provided is in reference to this body, this appointed body. So when we bring out, that's why I kind of use that word consultant, because they're a non-voting member. They are offering additional expertise. They will not affect whether or not a quorum is taking place.
Good question, Kathy. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, so I think this is the list. Delia will forward those out and we'll get those work groups going. And if anything comes up later, just let me know and Delia and I will talk together and see how to deal with that. Moving on to agenda item number H, recommendation for agenda items for next meetings. As Jessica pointed out, we can't take new items now, but we will have a meeting coming up. So we're interested in any thoughts anybody has for things they would like to be on that on the agenda for that meeting. If there are any, please let us know right now. Or later if you don't know right now.
If you don't know right now, Mary Winston again, TDLR, please contact advisory.boards@tdlr.texas.gov. Several of us get that email and we're able to just say requested items for EAB or however you want to say it. Delia is your point person within our group and we can get those handled at that time. So no rush if you don't have anything right now.
Giving everybody just a second to think and ponder that one thing that comes up. At the last second, everybody goes, oh. Okay, I'm not hearing anything. So let's move on to agenda item number, letter I, discussion of date, time, and location of next committee meeting. Delia?
So we can wait. I can poll the board, the committee at a later time. We'll make sure that all these work groups are able to meet. And so once they're ready for us to have the full committee, then we can go ahead and schedule. So I will poll the board.
Great, thanks.
And Mr. Ricard, at that time, we will probably have had some meetings with the different work groups. So we'll have reports from those work groups that would be a part of the agenda. Marcia just announced a huge project, very timely project, that we will probably have some updates at that time. Scheduling of the work groups. Thank you. I have someone from a staff member in the background. Thank you, Chloe Whalen, for reminding me to say this. You don't have to schedule these work group meetings. Staff will contact you, schedule the work group meetings. They will be virtual, so no problem. Don't think we're forgetting you or you're doing something or not doing something you should do. Staff will contact you for each of these work group meetings, so you will be good to go on that. For our upcoming meetings, we are currently within our strategic planning, so the whole agency is rocking and rolling behind the scenes, and we'll provide you updates on that as well for our next meeting. So we've got plenty to do, and in the meantime, Marcia's got plenty to do. So, date,
Thank you,
time, and
Mary.
location. If we could poll you after some of these meetings occur, that would be great. And Marcia or Jessica may provide us some guidance or use some guidance on when that next meeting should be based on the work that gets done during the meantime.
Thanks, Mary. That's great.
Cornell, I have a question for Marcia. Will you kind of provide an outline of what the end game is with the committees, what you're seeking? I would just like to know that in the materials in advance so that I have the best opportunity to help.
You mean, sorry, Marcia Godo with RPM. Are you referring to the work groups and what you want the work groups to do?
Yes.
So,
Go ahead, Marcia.
No, go for it.
Yeah, I know I've thrown Marcia out there and talked about all the work she has to do, and she does. But for each of the work groups, Marcia will not be calling those specific work groups. You will have someone from enforcement, someone from GC, likely Jessica, as well as RPM, someone from Marcia's group. But on each of the work groups and on our agendas, it does say review and make recommendations regarding X and Y. Review and make recommendations. So that's pretty general. But specifically, when that staff member gives you a call, they will let you know what the assignment is and what you'll be working on during that work group. So what's the goal, and your input from your profession will be needed for us to reach those goals.
Okay, so I just would request that the information, whatever that is, that it comports with whatever those study materials that we need to look at in advance.
Definitely,
so that we can
definitely.
yield the best outcome for you.
Definitely. And Mr. Parnell, for instance, I always go with enforcement because I was an enforcement prosecutor for years. There's a criminal convictions guidelines that need to be done, reworked. There's a penalty matrix and different enforcement related matters. So that one's kind of more specific, or maybe it's just more understandable for me. But so you'll have very specific things that you'll work through, but staff will provide you all of that. You will not go in blind.
Okay. Then lastly, Mary, because I worked on procedural stuff before, if there's stuff that's not, if there's additional information that we seek or we think would be good as far as an improvement to the procedures from working through those procedures, not just because they're going to align with new TAS 2022, but can we as the committee give other recommendations that we see that we're not being asked to study?
Yes, within your work group, yes, you can make those suggestions. That kind of broadens it. Well, it's not a limited scope. This just gives you an example of what we'll be doing, which is why it's really general. So that is really good.
Okay.
Yeah, you're good with that.
Thank you very, very much. Always spot on with your answers.
Awesome. Thank you.
Marcia
thanks, Mary.
Godo.
Go ahead, Marcia.
I was going to say Marcia Godo with RPM. I'd like to add that anytime the advisory or the public has suggestions or wants to make comments, we are open to them. We do take them and store them in our little files and keep them in mind. That's how the 22 TAS proposal started, actually, was suggestions.
Thanks. And I'll just add that Mary's explanation is really good and is an example of, it really explains why we don't need to have chairs of each of the work groups, because staff really drives the process.